Hey, welcome back everybody to the Pop Culture SquadCast. Mike's back, so we're good to go. We're excited about that. We have two guests tonight. Hopefully two. One of them should be coming up pretty soon. But what's fun is our first guest is going to be Marc Fishman. Our second guest is Matthew Dow Smith, who's going to be hanging out with us tonight. But what's interesting is when I was making the little video tonight, I could have just left one of the slides in there from the last time because Steve Orlando was our guest last time, and Matt and Steve worked together. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Thank you for asking. I'm thinking that you and I should be using our middle names on the show tonight because
Sure.
our two guests have three names.
Yeah, but my middle name doesn't work. It's not like because I got the Bob and we got the Mike. See, that's the other part. Like we have the nickname at the front, so putting it in there
That's
is
true.
well. So,
That's true.
I want to talk to you. We have a lot of things we need to talk about. One of the things I want to talk about is kind of timely, and I wanted your opinion on it because it also relates to your column that came out yesterday, which I'm going to put in the chat so everyone can see that.
Whoa.
But no, your column yesterday was 5 tropes that you're missing. And let me just see here. Edit link, copy it. Copy.
All you folks who are speed readers.
Yeah, well, you can get it later. You don't have to read it now, but it's fine. We want people to see this stuff out there. But
I've gotten a lot of response to it.
It was really excellent. It was really fun. I enjoyed it. Mike was talking about 5 tropes that he misses in comics. And I think we're gonna get to them all later because I'd like to talk to Matt about it and see his reactions to them. But one of the ones was the dead stay dead, and that's something we are going to talk to Matt about. And
has Matt killed people?
No, but he brought people back. He worked with Jeff in making Hal the Spectre.
Oh my!
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but topically, and I'm going to share this into the stream. Tomorrow, there's a big event happening in comics, in Marvel Comics particularly, and it is related to this. And so this is coming out in July. It's going to be a retrospective of what happens tomorrow, but everyone knows there's no reason to worry about spoilers in this situation. Though anybody who's buying Amazing Spider-Man 26 tomorrow knows that Kamala Khan is going to die. She's going to be gone. And
at least for a while.
I don't think it's going to be that long of a while, but yeah. That's
yeah.
The thing. I don't it feels this one feels slimy, for lack of a better word. I don't know. What's your opinion on it?
My opinion is whenever a comic book publisher tells you they're going to kill off a character, look at the list of upcoming movies and see if that character's name is on the list. If so, you know that, and oddly enough, she is. Not only that, but the trailer is out. And by the way, I think it's a wonderful trailer. I thought it was
I can't wait
cool.
to see the movie.
Yeah. So we know that she's not going to stay dead, just like Superman and Lois Lane had to get married because they were married on that TV show. Well, that 1,000 years ago. Ms. Marvel will be back. I think they're just going to make some changes to the character in terms of her powers and that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting that I believe, from my perspective, and I'm guessing, and probably some other people, helped me with this thought. But first of all, I mean, it can't be Jim Zub's idea. He can't say, hey, I'm going to write Amazing Spider-Man and let me kill Kamala Khan in Amazing Spider-Man. That just doesn't make any sense.
Happened to me once.
Really?
Where another writer wanted to kill off a character that I was publishing, mm-hmm. And it was a big name writer whose name I will probably not mention yet, and he wanted to kill this guy off. He wanted to kill Blackhawk off, And of all the characters that DC's got, and they got a lot, Blackhawk probably wouldn't be missed terribly. But we were in the middle of doing something. We
Yeah.
had a whole creative team going,
Hmm.
and they're doing
Is
good
this
work.
Howard's Blackhawk, or is it?
This was Howard's Blackhawk, but
But this
it
is
was
Marty's.
after. It was after that, yeah.
The one Marty was writing then, right?
Marty and Rick Burchett,
Mhm.
who did a wonderful job. Both of them did a wonderful job on the series,
Mhm.
and I was having fun with it. And it was
Sure.
selling. It was selling good, very good, not phenomenal, but considering DC's crack marketing department declined to tell anybody of its existence, which was pretty much their policy if there wasn't a bat in the book. I thought it was doing pretty well.
I guess Martha wasn't working there then.
Martha may have been working there. Martha probably was not in a position to shoot her boss.
So,
however, I am sure the thought occurred to her.
The reason I say that is because one of the things that Roger Stern told me about the death of Superman, which kind of relates to this, is that Martha didn't know that she was only supposed to publish or market things that said Batman.
Yes.
And
yes.
So by marketing the death of Superman, and the other part about the death of Superman was interesting is that, what I learned with Roger, and I don't know if I said this on this show, but I've said it other places, but and you can check it out. There's a whole podcast or on YouTube. You can find the whole panel that I did with Roger. He said that they originally, when they got there to figure out what they were going to do next after the engagement, they're like, oh, well, we're going to plan the wedding, over the next 6 months to a year. That's what we're going to plan. And the head honchos or whoever at Warner, I guess at the time, said, no, hold off on that because Lois and Clark is doing really well with this will they, won't they thing. And we don't want you getting married in the comics if they're not going to get married yet on TV. So That's why then Jerry apparently said, well, we can always kill him. And then Carlin said, maybe we'll try that. That's how the death thing happened out.
According to Roger. And that's why I miss Mike Carlin as the editor of the Superman books. Now, a lot of people have followed him. Absolutely. A lot of people followed him and did good. Many of them did very good work. But Mike really had it down. And of all of the Superman editors, from Vince Sullivan on, I think Mike had the most positive effect on the character. And it is Superman, that's not an easy character to mess with.
Oh, I agree. I think Mike did a great job for the
Absolutely.
time that he did.
Absolutely.
I think despite the challenges he has, I think Paul Kaminsky's doing a good job these days on what they're doing. Despite, action's fantastic.
I don't know Paul. Yeah, I agree. I don't know Paul, but I do admire his work.
Sure.
He's the easiest way to tell whether you like an editor's work or not is to look at the books that you enjoy reading and look at the editor's name. And if you see one person's name on a lot of them,
consistently, sure,
right?
I had that problem with a guy named Mike Gold. He just kept editing everything I loved when I was growing.
So. Yeah, he got that out of his system.
I don't. Well, we should fix that, but
I have another project or two in me, but
we will get to that. We will get those coming out.
Okay.
I want to. We're going to get to our guest in a second. First guest in a second, and so I'm going to hold off on the other topic that we were going to do in the Bob and Mike time. Listeners and watchers, we are going to get to the Flash Gordon story. I know I've promised that to people in the past, but we are going to get to the Flash Gordon story. We'll do hopefully next time, as long as there's no breaking news, we'll get to that. One last thing on the Kamala Khan thing before we bring in Mark is, like as Robert said, thanks Robert for being there. It feels like they're resetting her. They're they're going to bring her more in line with what the fans of the TV and subsequent movies are going to be familiar with. So they may reset her power base. I think they're already planning, and when she comes back in the comics, she's going to be a mutant as opposed to an Inhuman, or maybe a mutant Inhuman. But like the concept of the fact that she is an inhuman is due to corporate stupidity, and now they're killing her to fix that corporate stupidity, right? Like the reason that she was introduced as a human or an inhuman was because Marvel couldn't make X-Men movies. They couldn't make mutant movies. So when you're going to create a new character, don't create a new mutant.
Right.
We're never going to be able to make a movie or anything out of it. And now they can, and they tried to make Inhuman movies. That's why the X-Men comics ended, and they were really boosting up the Inhumans. They made a terrible TV show, and now they don't want to hear the word Inhuman anymore.
Yes, I think it was very obvious if you care about this sort of thing, and there's no reason why a reader should necessarily, unless you want to. But I think it was very obvious that they were pissed off at the whole X-Men thing. If you looked a little bit behind the scenes, you'd understand the whole 20th Century Fox number, and along with Fantastic Four, which they also shit canned. And it's like they crossed out the word mutant and put in the word Inhumans,
Right.
for a couple of years, and that didn't work because the Inhumans have always been ill-defined, and we need to remember that Kirby introduced these characters one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
They were all the original Inhumans were all individual characters, which is very different from the X-Men.
When you were reading those as they were coming out at the time, because they were all introduced in Fantastic Four, right? For the most part, maybe in Avengers a couple later.
Yeah, the core, the original core group was introduced in the Fantastic Four.
And they were the I haven't read those, but were they at some point like, oh yeah, we're all together, we're all family?
Yeah,
it was an afterthought. You think?
I don't think so. Oh, I don't know. I can't say. I really don't know. It's a shame Marc Evanier isn't here. He probably does, but it seemed pretty obvious in the beginning. That 10-issue run of Fantastic Four, where they introduced Silver Surfer and Galactus, and my God, what an amazing run of comics! A high watermark in superhero comics, and if at that point in time that didn't make you a Jack Kirby fan, then you should just give up reading comics, or at least superhero comics. Just give it up, because if that doesn't work for you, nothing's going to work.
And that, folks, is Mike Gold waxing poetic about Fantastic Four, which I love. All right.
I bought the first issue off the newsstand.
I know you did. Oh my
God.
I find that to be amazing.
I find that to be really old.
All right, we're going to bring in our first guest, who is a member of Pop Culture Squad. He is, we want you to welcome artist, writer, polka mashup genius, and dad to a tribe of fishmen, Marc Allen Fishman. And I think there's one in his arms. Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Oh.
Hey, Mira, queen of the fishmen.
That's right. That's right.
So
Marc, how many kids do you have now? Can you?
We lost track at 15.
Yeah.
I've started adopting neighbors. They don't even, if they come in and if they even have half a Jewish nose, I just assume it's mine. A few of them have like papered on beards.
I don't know how much Kathy would appreciate that, though.
Well, again, we're only going to keep 2 of them, so stay tuned. We're pitching to Netflix and Max. It's a reality show. No, we just got 4, just 4, 3 boys and the queen.
Queen. You guys and the Unshaven Comics True. Hi, Mira. Hi. You guys are going to be at Fan Expo Philadelphia this weekend.
Yes, 2 of us. Kyle and I.
2 of you are. All right. It is Friday, June 2nd to Sunday, June 3rd. And I'm going to Hi. And so this is where you can go. You can get there. There's all kinds of cool stuff going on at this show. It's at the Philadelphia Convention Center. I will put the tickets link in the chat so people can get to it. If you or anybody in the area, go see the guys. There's some, star people going to be there. And of course, the big attraction is the Unshaven Comics folks.
That's okay. We'll take second billing to Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox, and
Well,
but
why wouldn't you?
There's some really good comic book people coming too, so it's looking to be a good show. We did that show last year, and this year we turned to Kyle and said, you're 98% of the sales here, so where do you want to go? And he said, I want to go back to Philly or DC and Atlanta. So we said, okay, well, we looked at the timing. Philly was better, so we ended up going there. Hilariously, Fan Expo, as we're learning, is like a series of island nation states, not a single company, because we had also applied for Denver. And apparently that team doesn't talk to the Philly team because we were accepted, then waitlisted in a very odd, like... Hey, yeah, you're totally coming. And we are, and they're like, no, you're not. But if you wait a week, we'll let you know. We say, great. And we waited like 3 weeks, and they're like, don't worry, we'll tell you soon.
Well, so I wanted to talk to you about, so you and Kyle or you and Matt? I'm sorry.
Me and Kyle.
So you and Kyle, you're going to bring Polka mashups, obviously Samurnauts, Kyle stuff.
Yep.
Should be tons of stuff at the Unshaven Comics booths for everybody to find. What was your feeling? You haven't been on the show, I don't think, since C2E2. What was your feeling? Besides the economics of the show, what's the vibe that you're getting from visitors coming to comic shows in the post-critical pandemic times?
Well, I'd say I don't want to say back to normal, but I would definitely say I'd say hi. Yeah, I would say hi. Relief and just back to basics. That's the way it's felt.
Okay.
We've had similar booth traffic, similar interactions to folk, and we did the first show we did back was Dragon Con, when they sort of separated booths out and everyone had to wear masks indoors, and they limited the number of people in the building, or so they said, and it was awkward. The whole show was awkward. Us trying to pitch through masks. It was exactly like that. Yeah, not good.
One of my great regrets. Aha, hi. Oh, a guest appearance. Cool.
And guess that. No, I'd say that with the influx of stars coming back, and from our booth perspective, I don't want to say like we missed a step, because it felt like everybody was still happy, and it was a decent show for us. And I would say it was the first time in a long time that Reed actually was nice to us, which is a rare
at Heroes. Well, I mean, there was some stuff there that went on in terms of you guys being in small press and then not small press not happening. I spoke to someone recently who was super unhappy with it, but mostly because of the squishing that happened at the end of it. But you guys seemed to do well, and it definitely seemed like the people there. We were there. Mike and I were there as well, and it was excited. People were happy to be there, and I feel that pretty much everyone.
Mike was just there to close and lock the door.
Sure.
At the end of the show, we did one panel and had a great time, and then
it was a great time.
Ate food, which is the primary thing I do, particularly with Marc in Chicago.
Yes. And I would say this past C2E2, in addition to my wife, who was just here getting her bucket list checked off because she got to meet Chris Evans.
And me.
Yeah, well, yes.
She also got to meet me, because that was...
I would say, though, I'm a little angry that neither of you would do the photo shoots. Kathy told me she gave you guys each $500 and you didn't show. Mm-hmm. So she's just got like arms out like this. I had to Photoshop you in using that generative filter thing, and it doesn't know either of you. But aside from that, the interesting thing, the whole show for us was really, So we were taken care of. We felt good about it. But for me, there was a great con story that happened afterwards. Matt and I, since the way we live now, Kyle goes north, Matt and I come south. Matt and I have just taken to going to Huck Finn's for dinner, because then you're in, like, here's all these great donuts you can take home, right?
Prick.
Sorry. Not sorry. We went to Huck Finn's and sitting down, this is Sunday night, and only in Chicagoland after a Comic-Con, and Mike will probably get this more than others, but Oak Lawn and the McCormick Center are not exactly neighbors. So you really have to be on your way home if you're hitting Huck Finn. And here comes in a guy dressed up as Kratos, the Easter Bunny. Like
Nice.
Full body paint, bunny ears, and his normal looking happy wife. And they sat down at a booth next to us, and like all denizens of Comic-Con, we did the very polite nod and like, yes, we too know where you came from in our obvious comic book gear. And Matt and I are eating, and then 3 minutes later, the wife goes, "Oh my God, you're Marc Allen Fishman." And
what?
I was
Nice.
Yes, I am. And how do you know that? And I'm like, did you see us at the show? She goes, "Oh, hell no, I didn't go to that thing." She goes,
she had a subpoena, right?
Yeah, she goes, you're the guy from Homewood. You teach the comic classes and you have a daughter. And she starts like going through my resume. I'm like, please tell me you're from Homewood or somewhere. She's like, yeah, I'm from Homewood. I was like, oh, thank God. Because Matt's sitting there, he's just having a great time. He's like, yes, please keep telling me about Marc, because you don't know me yet. But I said, I felt something. It's where I earned my D-list celebrity status of Homewood.
That is excellent. That's fantastic. That's a great experience.
Yes.
Have either of you seen the Guardians Volume 3 yet?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. You want to talk about it?
Sure.
Okay.
I cried for I'd say like at least the last 90 minutes. Just wet mess of tears, and I don't know how I could have been more pleased. I think James Gunn walks away with the best 3 movies that I can think of that don't need to be touched, don't need to be revisited, don't need to be retconned or looked at again. And even though there's some weird holiday specials and one-offs, cartoons or whatever, Guardians 1, 2, and 3, especially because of 3, to me seem to stick the landing harder than anything Marvel did, and that includes Endgame.
Wow. I enjoyed it immensely. And like Marc, my daughter, Adrian, was also in tears through at least the second half of the movie. And which is always kind of fun when you know, everybody else in the auditorium is laughing their heads off at all the jokes. But nonetheless, it was a very evocative movie. It was a wonderful finish to that 3-movie arc. It reaffirms my faith in James Gunn, although he has a hell of a job ahead of him, because his remake the DC EU order doesn't extend to Batman, and if it doesn't extend to Batman, then you're screwed. Well, you can't remake the DC universe.
Yeah, what I mean, Batman, Brave and the Bold. He's going to make Brave and the Bold with Batman and Damian.
Well, I guess Flash. Not to jump over there, but that's going to set up a lot of stuff for them as to what's plausible going forward or not. But yeah, I mean, exiting that movie, Guardians 3. You go, well, James Gunn, and not that James hasn't already shown he knows what he's doing at DC too, because his Suicide Squad, to me, was
brilliant.
Well, first of all, the best DC comic-based movie, like if we take away all the one-offs and the random Bat projects. But unto itself, I think Kyle and I, we caught up immediately after watching that movie separately, and we said, this one felt the most like the comics of anything we've seen in recent past. Just the way it was structured,
and Brother John was in it.
Well, yes,
in the very beginning.
Yes, yeah, you can't miss that part. But I mean, they handled Starro. They made Peacemaker. Well, I think that's James Gunn's not so hidden talent. Is he actually maybe does better with unknowns than knowns, which is where I'm kind of holding my breath with everything he's doing at DC. Because I think he can write up me a better Peacemaker and a Weasel movie than he may necessarily a Superman, but I don't know yet.
Well, that's why he's starting with Creature Commandos.
Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice. His Peacemaker, which I loved to death, both in the Suicide Squad and the TV series, and it was kind of fun to see two of those characters just sort of pop up for absolutely no good reason in Shazam 2, the boring movie. But we did a miniseries about 30 years ago over at DC, a Peacemaker miniseries. Paul Kupperberg wrote it, and it was really tits to the wind. It's like, let's really milk this character for all he's worth. He's insane. He's got an insaner dead father. Let's run with that. And there was a lot of that type of energy in that series and in that characterization. So for me, and it's actually one of my favorite miniseries, at least, that I've ever worked on. I really enjoyed doing that. And it was nice to see our efforts rewarded, because there were elements in this in both the movie and the TV show from that series, and Paul was credited.
Yeah, and I think if I'll even steer it back to Guardians, just because of something that James Gunn did that I thought was funny that shouldn't be missed. A lot of Marvel fans that I see on various fan groups have all been saying, hey, we know that there's this Jonathan Majors problem that no one wants to talk about, and we as the fans have collectively met, and we all agree that the High Evolutionary now is just a Kang variant, and just get that guy back. There you go. We will just use him, and we're all okay. Because James Gunn, in 30 seconds, decided to be like, hey, I will make you hate somebody more than you've hated any other Marvel villain in 27 films. And here you go. Let's endanger some animals and children. How do you feel now? No shades of gray. Just...
Yeah. Well, he's a horrible villain. He has always been that. It was a good characterization of a.
He seemed horribler in the movie than ever in the comics, and that, I think that's because the performance.
The performance was great. I also think it comes from putting smiley faces on the Animan and making them look like they a little less brutalized, than they actually were. But they were, if you think about what he did. I felt it was definitely the best Marvel movie that I saw since Endgame. I don't know if I'm going beyond that, because Endgame was such an experience and a spectacle.
Endgame was amazing, but it was, I dare say, about 17 endings too long.
Well, there's that. So, I think I think that it's one of Bradley Cooper's finest acting jobs, in everything, and I'm a huge fan. But I also think what I loved about this movie, it had the right mix of humor and drama and action, like the best corridor action scene in Marvel history by far. Better than the Daredevil season 1 Hall scene. It also, I think, had the best soundtrack of the three.
Yeah, I kind of mash all three of them up into one super club remix thing. I enjoyed all of it. I'd say, like, the interesting thing about 3, in some cases, like, everybody got an arc that ended, which was great. But if you look at some of those arcs, like Drax, he may be the one guy where I say you really shaved off every edge of that character almost immediately, because he realized what a gem he had in Dave Bautista. But he may have also missed some of the pathos of the character right up until the edge in 3, when I won't spoil it for the people who haven't watched it, but they close out Drax's arc in the most obvious way that was sort of like oh yeah, that makes complete sense. I really enjoyed that. I loved their little teaser at the end. Like, you could clearly go forward with what they left.
It was interesting.
And somehow I remember, so when Phase 1 came out, and Matt, Kyle, and I, like the rest of the real comic book people. Yeah? Okay. She agrees with this point, so that's why I'm
She
bringing it up.
does. Yeah, exactly.
So when we saw the slate of Phase 1, I think I turned to Matt and Kyle and said, if they pull off Ant-Man and Guardians of the Galaxy, Marvel is basically just got a license to mint money, because those aren't just B-listers like Iron Man who might be semi-recognizable. Like, these are F-class. Nobody knows who any of these people are, and they're not attaching major stars. I mean, no offense, but Chris Pratt wasn't a major star when they started that. Bradley Cooper was the biggest name I think they might have had. But to see like all of them grow, and then by the end of the series, you're left with a more comic book accurate version of the book where it came from. Like, it seems like James Gunn kind of took that whole thing and kind of left it. He's like, okay, I can return it back to where it's supposed to be, put the library book back on the shelf, and gracefully moonwalk the hell out of there.
We should remind ourselves that it took a lot of work from a lot of people, few of whom have ever been to Hollywood, to get that third movie made with James Gunn.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, and that puts so much on the table, and it paid off. It paid off 100%.
Have you guys talked about the recent rumors about Margot Robbie, by the way?
No, we haven't talked about it.
As Lois Lane? Oh, no.
Sue Storm.
Sue Storm. Right. I always confuse the two. One's hard to see. I've read that. I've heard that. I don't know if I believe it.
I don't want to. I've heard it too. I think that. So it's one of those things out there that there's people who are like, their professional job is to rumor monger for movie casting, and I don't understand that concept, and I don't really get into it. I've seen it. I did see it. I mean, the cast that I saw that is being rumored out there, I don't know, I can get behind that. I want a good Fantastic Four movie.
That would be great.
Yes, that would be also a nice change of pace.
Sure.
I think that it would be nice for Margot a lot, because she's thought of as Harley, and you know, the other roles she's had are by and large a little strange and off center. Here, Sue is relentlessly a normal human being who applies normal human being reasoning to preposterous situations. That's her strength. And it would be fun to see her play that character. So it is kind of appealing to me.
Is it wrong that when I saw the rumor mill with the 4 names attached, that I personally cried BS for the money? And I understand that Marvel is richer than, you know, all compare, but I see the Fantastic Four especially as a huge financial burden, because they're easily a 3-picture franchise on top of being in Secret War and any other whatever, which is why they had the little, you know, wink and a nod with Krasinski in Doctor Strange, where even the director had said, oh yeah, we just put him in there to shut the fans up. Like, this is a one and done. Don't expect him to come back. We just did it to do it. But the combination of seeing, spoiler alert from what they say, and it doesn't mean anything, Adam Driver and Margot Robbie together. And then, I mean, I don't know if Daveed Diggs is exactly making a ton of money, but like, I just saw those 3 names. Like, that seems like a lot of.
The other guy is pretty good too.
Oh, all 4 of them are extremely talented, and I'm not saying I wouldn't love all of them in the roles. But,
sure.
They need to put some money on the screen, both in terms of casting and in terms of effects and story, because Fantastic Four, I don't want to say it failed in its first 3 movies.
The third movie, which is the second, that's a failure. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the box office. Those box office numbers are surprising on a lot of the movies that we thought should have failed. By the time all is said and done, they made money.
Okay.
Not Hollywood money, but they made money. Here, the stench of those 3 movies is going to waft its way into the theaters. They need something to counter that.
Can I dare ask, though? Let's say not Doctor Doom in the first one. What villain would you put in for the first?
Me, Submariner,
Or
in a
Manda?
heartbeat.
That would be
In a
awesome.
heartbeat, because it draws them right into the center of the Marvel universe, the cinematic universe, and it allows them to not have to establish those connections to the Marvel universe.
Or establish the villain either, because he's already an
Right.
existing villain.
Right.
So it allows them to spend more time on the 4.
Right.
I would do that, but can I add a set piece and say that just because you have to recreate that first comic cover and have them fight? I think that's Giganto or something like that, and just have that be retconned to be something out of the ocean.
Yeah, the Simpsons already did it.
What haven't they done?
There's a giant monster in the ocean in the MCU. Somebody can go fight that.
Yeah,
that's actually that's actually the name of an episode of South Park.
Yeah,
the Simpsons have already done it.
Oh yeah. Well, that's its own thing. It's like we've think Unshaven Comics does like what Pop Culture Squad does every other week, but we only talk to each other. And it came up where I think someone had posed that question. Like, we've always asked, like, when will the Simpsons ever end? And then I just happened to look at him like, well, by the time they're ready to actually retire, I bet you audio engineering, artificial intelligence could likely allow them to go indefinitely.
Well, that's a terrible thought.
Isn't it?
We'll see once the strikes are over whether that would be possible, because Screen Actors Guild and AFTRA have yet to go out. They probably will soon, and they're going to go out for
the Simpsons. But I'm pretty sure at this point, Mike, Fox executives could just go to ChatGPT, auto-generate a script for The Simpsons, feed AI to record it, and no one would be able to tell if it's actually the AI or just what's currently coming out by them.
I agree, but it still gets ratings.
Yeah,
people, it's entertaining people. I mean, it's almost impossible for a sitcom to work for 30 years, or even more than maybe 2 years.
It will. Yeah, its legacy is more than set. I mean, that said, like, I'll admit the last time I've actually sat down and watched a full episode of The Simpsons new was the Treehouse of Horror last year, because it got the buzz about it being the anime and all the other stuff. And I would say I enjoyed what I watched, but I tried going into the next week and I got past, let's call it the animated cold open, and I was like, okay, and I moved on.
I mean, they've satisfied me over a long period of time. It doesn't attract my attention. Although, I've been listening to Homer talk since he was with WXRT back, in the Marconi days. So there is that continuity for me personally.
Sure.
Definitely roots there.
So I have a question about the show. What you got going on? Any new Poke mashups?
Yeah. Let's see. I've been trying to finish out the anime stuff because recent trends have told me the kids like that. So I mashed up Dragonite with Chainsaw Man, which my son suggested. He was very pleased by that. I took character
AJ's idea, right?
Bennett's.
Oh, Bennett.
Yeah.
Really? Does Bennett have an agent yet?
Yes, it's me, and I charge 10%.
He's going to renegotiate that pretty soon.
Probably.
Yeah.
For him. Let's see. I did the character from Naruto. His name's Asuma. Mashed him up with Cubone. That was my first fan.
I saw that one.
The fan purchased custom, which he's the first one that ever asked. He came up. He's like, "Oh my god, can I choose my own?" And I was like, on the fly, just sure. And I named my price, and he's like, "Done." Great. And I was like, I still got to go home and draw it and ship it to you. He's like, take your time. I'm not going anywhere. It's great.
That's awesome.
Let's see. Did that. A whole bunch of anime stuff. And then for this show specifically, so here's what we landed on. With the Asuma Cubone, I have 63 Pokemon mashups. I purchased my third rotating rack for the table, which would leave me 72 slots.
Nice.
So I had to backfill, and I said, well, I do not have the time to make 9 more Pokemon mashups. So what I have, what can I do? So I acquiesced against my better judgment, and Matt just saying, oh, shut up and do it. My Disney Princess Sailor Moon set is coming back for one show only, please. And I'm doing a couple of just stuff from my archives that was just for friends that seems like, well, you know what? Who cares? It'll go on the rack and maybe it'll make somebody laugh. Cards that I've been told in the past are such terrifying abominations that they are still causing night terrors and sleep paralysis.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing all of that to the city of brotherly love.
You know, as a Chicago fan, it's all the least I can do for Philly.
All right. Well, we're going to be there Saturday. So I didn't know if I told you. So we're going to come up and we're going to be there Saturday. So we'll see you. We're going to hand you some pins so you can hold on and pass around. And we, if anybody does find me or Mark or any Pop Culture Squad person at a show, we charge a follow for a pin. So follow us somewhere. You get a new pin. We just bought new ones. So that'll be awesome. So I will see you Saturday. Everyone should go to Fan Expo Philadelphia this weekend.
Please. Yeah, we're in the back of Artist Alley. I wish I remembered my table, but it's some weird, non-memorable number. So basically, if you go to Artist Alley, walk to the back. We are the last row, double table. You will not be able to miss us because you go down the middle, and we are on the corner.
Awesome.
Or just listen for Kyle.
Yeah, oh yeah. Don't even listen. Just you'll see the sign.
He'll bring you. He'll mentally just Jean Grey you to him.
It's what he does better than anybody else, and that's why he keeps coming back. And well, this time especially, it's going to be more his books than ours. But mark my words, when we go to Dragon Con at the end of the summer, we will be dropping a new issue of Samurnauts.
Oh, that is awesome! That's terrific.
All right.
Great news.
You're not going to go to Baltimore, are you?
Sadly, we had to make the choice, and we are going to Canada the same time that Baltimore happens. We're going to go to the Winnipeg Comic Con.
Oh my!
We did Toronto 2 years in a row, and 2 years in a row it was the best show we had ever done. So we wanted to roll the dice again, but we all agreed we wanted to try any other place in Canada that we could drive. And looking at the map, the only other place that made sense was Winnipeg. So I was like, well,
you can drive to
Montreal. Montreal's not that far.
But
Winnipeg.
we don't speak French.
Last time I was in Winnipeg was in September, which is when I gather you're going to be there. It was colder than a witch's tit.
Yes.
And like you, Mark, I grew up in the Chicago area, and I'm used to cold weather. I enjoy cold weather, but this was just almost unbearable.
Would you
so I'm hoping you have a better
Wisconsin cold?
You have time for a really quick Mike Grell story? I'll tell you a quick Mike Grell story.
Who doesn't want to listen to a Mike Grell story?
Really quick. I was in Chicago. It was like 20 below zero in the middle of the night. And people were just pissed because it doesn't get that cold in Chicago, or Earth for that matter. So I'm talking to Mike, who at this point in time is living on the northern border of Wisconsin, right up against the UP Michigan border, and which is where he grew up. And it isn't as cold there as it is in Frostbite Falls, but almost. So I was about to bitch about the weather, and Mike says, "Yeah, it's 47 below zero here." And I go, "Oh, well, let's change the subject." That was it. And Mike knew exactly where I was going.
Yeah. Well, it's also not that cold in Scartaris, even though it's over in the North Pole, right? So he knows how to make it warm where it shouldn't be.
Yes, it involves shooting a lot of people or a lot of animals. Excuse me.
Okay.
We
You
won't
put your
talk
hands
about
over the
people.
barrel of the gun, then it warms them up.
It warms them up. Yeah, sure.
All right, Mark. Thanks for coming, and we're gonna let you go and get back to the brood, and we will see you on Saturday. Sherry and I will be there. We have a couple things for you, but we'll see you then.
Awesome. You guys have a good night.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, take it easy, Mark.
Bye.
Whoa.
All right. It is everybody take a sec. We're gonna bring in our second guest.
I'm gonna take a swig.
Yeah. So we're gonna bring in our second guest. He is one of my favorite visual storytellers. He's at the top of every writer's favorite artist list. He probably is getting embarrassed, but that's true. He's worked with so many excellent writers and creating fantastic comics on his own. Just a couple of my favorite works of his are Bad Luck Chuck and Dead Kings, which people should have read if they haven't already. So I want to welcome to the SquadCast, Matthew Dow Smith.
I want that song playing every time I walk into a room now. That would be really awesome.
Hire a band, a live band,
Oh, okay.
follow you at
Yeah,
every
that'd be
convention.
great.
That'd be
I'm totally
wonderful.
down. I'm totally down with it. But let's not talk about me. Let's just talk about Mike Grell for a while.
Well, so here's the thing. We said we were saying something earlier in the conversation where, if you want, I can be either Kingdom Come Oliver Queen, right?
Yep.
Or if I get a Steranko wig, I could be Warlord, right?
I see it. I totally see it.
I need the Steranko wig, right? Obviously, but like I have a Grellish thing.
It's the rest of the Warlord's costume.
Well, no, I'm not doing that. Thank goodness I'm not Shakira, so we won't talk about that. So,
the Warlord started off as this little throwaway thing in a weekly shopper newspaper that died after 2 or 3 issues. And it was horribly off-register. It made Charlton Comics look like they were professionally printed. And I picked up a copy of this thing at, my local elevated station in Chicago. And I'm looking at this and going like, there's really good art in here if you cross your eyes. And then shortly thereafter, I saw the Warlord in a little house ad coming soon, And I was already a fan because I liked those 2 issues or 3 issues, whatever.
The first 3.
Yeah. And
not
of the Warlord, the Savage Earth.
Yeah.
And he winds up at DC, so I wind up at the Chicago Comic-Con doing the programming and stuff in 1976. So I heard that Mike was living in Wisconsin, and I got a hold of him and I invited him to our first show.
So you were friends with him before you started working at DC?
About a month.
Well,
about 2 weeks. About 2 weeks before I started working at DC. Yeah.
Right. That's great. That's awesome. Well, so Matt, for guests or people who are listening, I apologize. We're going to go a little inside, but like the conversation we had earlier in the green room about that night from last year was related to the origin of Warlord. And sometime when I see you again, I will tell you that whole story because
I want to hear that story. I read Warlord as a kid. I mean, it was one of those books. I have a very distinct memory of finding out that Mike Grell was going to be doing Green Arrow, and I didn't. No offense to Green Arrow, it wasn't one of my favorite characters, but it was just like, I'm going to be reading the daylights out of this, just because.
Oh yeah.
Mike was one of those first creators, and there's maybe 8 or 10 of them. When I was a little kid, like I knew who they were, I knew what their work looked like. I got excited when I saw them at on a book, and that was like, we're talking the 80s here. Like that wasn't that common back then.
No,
The
no.
creators were a little more anonymous, but then you start getting your John Burns and people we could all name. But like Mike Grell, that was one of the first ones for me, and I followed him. I followed him to First Comics, Mike. I mean, because I really loved his work.
And you followed him to Green Arrow.
I did. Longbill Hunters. That was Longbill Hunters.
So I've said this to a lot of people. I say it constantly, and I never get corrected on it. But Longbill Hunters changed the game.
Yeah.
I think, and I'll say this. Mike can nod away, but I think, and I've said this to other people recently, and gotten agreement on it, that what was going on at first allowed DC, or gave DC the guts to do things like The Watchmen and Dark Knight, and then subsequently when they brought Mike over to do Longbow Hunters. If First wasn't doing what it was doing, DC wouldn't have had the guts to do those books.
Well, they would have had the cause to bring me over.
Well, that too. That's another reason. I argue with people about that. They're like, no, I'm like, listen, Dick was watching what Mike was doing, and that's why he said, let me go get him.
Well, it's more than that. Dick actually was doing to me what Irwin Donenfeld did to Dick to bring him over from Charlton.
Again.
It was sort of we like your work. We really love to have you over here. And oh, by the way, bring along everybody you ever worked. Sure. And the cool thing is, it was in this bar in Westport, Connecticut. This old bar where all the old time cartoonists, comics, and newspaper strips and illustrators would hire a guy to bring all their artwork into the city. So it was right next to the train station, while the artists, got drunk for breakfast. And I'd known about this bar. It's legendary for those of us who have no life and study these things. And Dick said, let's meet there. And he knew that would just knock me over. And that is where Donenfeld had offered him the job. Donenfeld also owned a boating supply company, and their office was right by there. So what goes around comes around.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about Matt a little bit. So and it's been I think last time we saw each other, and I don't know if you remember, but last time we met was when Bad Luck Chuck was coming out in Awesome Con. You were there with Leela, which I love that book, and
thank you.
Need more Leela too.
Yeah, she's great. She's really talented.
You have a history with darker super. Are you losing me?
I see nothing. It is completely blank. Can you see me?
I can see you, and I can hear you. Why don't you back out? Why don't you jump out and come? I'll bring you back in as soon as you come.
Okay.
So we'll just pull him out for a second.
Yeah. It's just you and me now, Bob.
Well, we're going to get to it.
We can talk about Mike behind his back.
We're going to get to that. But I was saying, you have a history with darker and supernatural stories, like Sentinels of Magic, even back to the Spectre, like stuff you did for DC, but then a huge list of other things. And do you think there's a reason for that? Even your creator-owned stuff has supernatural, darker stories.
I explore a lot of that. I don't think the stuff that. The funny thing is, I not to get into too long a digression, but I think if you're a writer and artist, one of the weird things you don't really think about is what you do when your art doesn't match your writing. So I was drawing when I first broke into the industry 30 years ago now, which I don't want to think about, but I drew in a very dark, scratchy style. And it was well suited to magic characters. And those were characters that I really liked as a kid. I was a huge fan of Blue Devil. That was, sort of one of my absolute favorite characters ever. and Zatanna and Dr. Occult. And I gravitated toward those kinds of characters, and my art really worked well for that. But then, like, I started getting hired as an artist, and I kept being put on superhero books, which is great. I'm not complaining. I got to work at DC. I got to work with Archie Goodwin at DC, who was just like the absolute, puns are evil. Do not mention puns to me. Puns are anyways. But I write sort of Ray Bradbury happy stories. Yes, there's darkness to them, but one of the things that I kind of have come to the conclusion about what I write is that the world doesn't work the way that I wish the world worked. So I kind of write these stories where the world does work that way. And so I write sort of fairly positive stories. So I have this weird mashup between like this really dark style with a lot of shadows and this sort of more positive outlook in the stories. And also, a fair amount of humor. And I don't feel like those things really started to gel together until during the pandemic. I just said, screw it. I'm going to go do my own stories. And that's the Amelia Shadows thing that you flashed up during my fantastic intro. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
That's one of the things where I feel like I can have those things together organically. Anyways, there's a very long way of saying thanks. Thanks for noticing the art. I really appreciate that. And Mike is back.
Yay! And I heard every word you said.
Yeah, don't please forgive me for all the terrible things I said about you. So it's been interesting. That's like, those are the characters that I really gravitate to. I gravitate towards those magic characters, and we could have a whole long therapy session about why that is.
Well, I do want to say that I want to direct people to go. If you're not following Matt on Instagram, go follow him on Instagram and go just check, just scroll down his Instagram feed, because there are some just delightful drawings and interpretations of magic characters. Couple of months back, maybe almost to a year back, where you were doing the kid Sentinels. I mean, it was they were delightful and all this. So it was a lot of DC characters and other Hellboy world characters at a middle school level, and how would they interact with things, and just there was so much life and animation and information in those drawings. You've mentioned, and I don't have the details, so I want to ask you, there is something, the Amelia Shadows adult version or grown-up version of Amelia Shadows is coming to an end on your Patreon. What comes next for that?
Well, there's another. So, again, I'm very long-winded. I apologize, audience. I apologize, Mike. Bob already knows this about me because he's had to talk to me at conventions. I kind of have burned out on adult comics. I've kind of burnt out on mainstream comics, which is not to say that there's not amazing stuff being done right now. And, a lot of my friends are doing absolutely amazing stuff. But as a creator, I have kind of hit the wall in terms of feeling like I have anything to add to everything else that's being done in mainstream comics right now. And so I started doing, just for my own mental health, I did like a middle grade version of Amelia Shadows. And for those of you who don't know Amelia Shadows, it's basically, I wanted to do a riff on all the sort of female magic superheroes. So characters like Zatanna and Scarlet Witch. And the conceit of it is she's the daughter of the most evil magician in the world. And at a certain point she goes, oh, this is probably bad. I should probably stop him. So it's basically Zatanna if Zatara was very, very evil. Anyway, so I was having a great time doing the adult thing, but I was getting really burnt out with the adult thing. So just like I said, for my mental health, I went and did a middle grade story. I wrote it, I drew it, I colored it, I lettered it in a week, and it's like a 24-page story, and it was just flowed out so easily, and I had so much fun with it. And then you have to go back and draw the adult version, and you're like, just like really working at trying to get that feeling of excitement that you had with the kid stuff, and which is not to say that I think the adult stuff is bad, but I think there's something about creating for a new audience that really, really opened up this whole other thing. And kids laugh at my jokes. Adults think I'm an idiot, but kids think I'm really damn funny. So what's next is I'm probably going to do. I've planned another middle grade Amelia Shadow story, which is basically her being very annoyed with her father's arch nemesis who shows up at their house. And it's just, going to be another little fun throwaway thing. Hi, Guardian Bina. After that, I'm not entirely sure. I'm kind of putting a kibosh for now on adult things. I have a thing with J.M. DeMatteis that I'm doing, and I have a graphic novel that I can't talk about yet. At God's End. Marc and Moonshadow are one of those projects that I would not be doing comics if it wasn't for Moonshadow.
So
that's the book for me.
I want to take a minute, and I'm gonna steer you a little bit here.
Yeah, please, because I will.
So that's fine. I want to talk about the Godsend project, and I want to talk about Marc's 4-book thing. By the way, this is a scoop for Mike. We are going to have another one of the artists of the James DeMatteis books on our next show in 2 weeks, which is Tom Mandrake.
And Tom's fantastic.
Tom.
Yeah. So he is committed, and so he will be here for our watchers and listeners in 2 weeks. We're going to talk about Marc.
Will Jan be around?
I don't know. You got to talk to Tom about it. I've already interviewed Jan, so.
Oh well, excuse me.
I don't know. It was like I couldn't. It was great, like, because I didn't have easy access to Tom's email, and he wasn't replying in the other ways that I was trying to get in touch with him. So I finally sent an email to Jen, and I'm like, hey, I want to talk to Tom. I want to get Tom on the show with Mike because I want to talk about his thing with Marc, and I want to talk about, he's got a Jimi Hendrix thing that I think you might like to talk about. Plus, but anyway, Tom's going to be on in a couple weeks. But like, did Marc approach you? How did this project come about to you, and what's going forward with it?
The funny thing is, it escapes me now how Marc and I now know each other. I believe we met at an Albany Comic-Con several years ago now. And, like I said, Moonshadow's a defining book for me. And I have absolutely no shame and, have told him repeatedly that that's the book that got me back into comics when I was in college. And, we've been talking, we should do something together. We ended up doing a Star Trek book together. We did a one-off con book. First we did a Batman thing for Christy Quinn at DC Comics, which was great. A tie into Gods and Monsters, the movie.
Then, which is perfect for you to do.
Yeah, it was fantastic. It's one of those things where, I've worked with the digital side of DC quite a bit, and they call you up and they're like, "Hey, you want to do a Batman thing?" And you're like, "Yeah, sure, great, that'd be great." Do you want to do it with J.M. DeMatteis? And you're like, "Yes, I will be doing this project, and if you take me off of it, people will be hurt." But anyways, we really, I think we work well together. We then did the Star Trek thing, and I've really been pushing him. It's like, I want to do something that's really messed up and deep and weird. I want to do, Seekers into Mystery kind of thing. I want to do a Moonshadow kind of thing. And, he had pitched me a different book that was really good, but just wasn't quite for me. And then he had pitched me this book, and it was just like, yes, this is the book we should be doing. And then it was a long process. We talked about different ways of doing it. And then it became part of this Demultiverse thing.
So is it God's
which
End
is fantastic.
Or God's End?
To Marc, it's God's End. To me, it's God's End.
Interesting.
So we both have very different opinions on even how to pronounce the name of the book. But to me, it's God's End.
Marc is one of those really gifted writers who should be on the tip of everybody's tongue. They should be talking about him all the time. And this goes back decades. I've admired his work. He's done really good work on characters that not a lot of people have done really good work with. And I respect the fact that you and he make such a good team. But I'll tell you something. What I really enjoy when Bob ran, the covers of all those books of yours, they're all from different publishers, just about. And just as, you're writing for adults, you're writing for younger readers, you want to mix things up, you want to keep your work and your approach fresh. Working with all those different publishers allows you those opportunities as well. And I really respect that. That's really good. It's scary because if you're working for one publisher or two publishers, because you're a freelancer, you should have some backup. But still, you know where your next check is probably going to come from, maybe, which is more than freelancers know.
Sometimes, not always,
sometimes.
Sometimes
we've all got publishers in our background that owe us money.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. Well, I have an agent. That's her job. She
there you go.
Hounds them into that. Yeah, it's funny. I've been doing this for 30 years now. I did not get into comics to be an artist. I got into comics to be a writer. And as I've always said, I'm sure Bob's heard me say this a million times to fans and aspiring creators at shows. It's a lot easier to show somebody a picture you drew of Batman and say, I draw Batman like this, than it is to say, I have an idea for a Batman story. Let's talk. So because I could draw, I became an artist. And it's been a 30-year process of convincing people, no, wait, let me write something. But I write the way that I write specifically because of Marc and Ray Bradbury and Douglas F. I mean, and Marc, even now, as I get more into, I allow myself to be a little funnier. Marc's run with Giffen on the Justice League, and I know it's a celebrated run, and deservedly so. It's a brilliant piece of work, But it's weird for me because I learned how to draw by copying Keith Giffen drawings out of Legion of Superheroes when I was a kid.
Sure.
Which is just crazy. But anyways.
So I loved Marc growing up as well. I mean, the thing that he did just before he did Justice League, I believe he left Defenders to go do Justice League. If I'm right about the timing, I think that was it, because he didn't finish Defenders. Obviously, they were canceling it because of X Factor, but he was writing Defenders, and that was a great story. And then for him to go from there to Justice League was great. Of course. And I just reacquired issue 3 of the Iceman series, which is super underrated. That issue particularly was the last one I got. And let me tell you, Janice Chang's lettering in that book is off the wall. So good. Anyway, enough of my.
Well, one of my favorite things about being friends with Marc is that we're all of the age where comic shops were common when we were kids. You went to the drugstore, and if you got an issue, and it was the first of 2 parts, and you went back the next month and didn't have that issue, you never found out how that story ended. So one of the things I've been doing with digital comics is just going back and reading the finales of all these stories. I had no idea how any of them ever ended. And as part of this process, I've just been pulling up all the stuff that I read when I was a kid that I haven't seen since then, and I keep discovering that Marc wrote them.
Yeah.
There was a Doctor Strange thing, the Defender stuff, which I hadn't returned to as an adult, but it's like
that was good. That was really good.
But it was just I had all this crucial part of
the
my
Gargoyle
childhood.
Series.
Yeah.
Doctor Strange is a difficult character to write, unless you're Steve Ditko, then it's just autobiographical. But for most writers, it's like, okay, how do we get the tension going with a character who can essentially do anything? That's a problem with magic characters, magic-oriented characters in general. Doctor Strange, of course, is part of the Marvel Universe. So for him, it's even harder. And Marc really pulled that off brilliantly. There have been a lot of good people on Doctor Strange because he's been around since before you children were born. But
true.
But to stand out from that crowd, that's something. That's something.
Yeah, that's one of the things as someone who has pitched for the last 30 years various Magic characters, that's always the thing that you run into. It's that problem of, if they can do anything, how do you limit that, or how do you make that interesting?
Right.
And I to me, that's always the most interesting part of putting together the story. It's like, they can do anything, but kind of, for me, it's like, so what is this really about? What is this character really about? What are we exploring about this character?
Yeah.
There's always something. You can find something in any character that speaks to you.
Absolutely.
I want to kind of talk about that, since we're in this way. It kind of segues in a little bit, and I wanted to bring it up. I kind of teased it earlier for people who've been here for a while. When you were at DC, and you worked on Day of Judgment,
yeah,
which ended with Hal Jordan assuming the mantle of the Spectre, right? It kind of feeds into the let the dead stay dead. And that was one of the things that Mike brought up in his column this week. There's 5 tropes he wants back in comics, and for those who haven't read it, and it's in the chat, you can go find it and read it there. One of the things is backgrounds, and we're going to get to that. One issue stories. Well, you draw backgrounds, so we're going to talk about that, because you're an exception to the rule. One issue stories. He wants more war comics, which you qualify for, because Dead Kings is certainly a war story.
Dead Kings and Beast of the Black Hand.
Beast of the Black Hand, exactly. Yeah. Oh, even I'm sorry, the one early on, it was a dark.
Oh, I did the Blackhawk story in Sandman Mystery Theater.
There you go, too. That's right. So,
nice.
That's right. Anyway, the other thing is the dead stay dead, which that's hard to find anybody who's actually stayed dead. That's part of the hilarity of Blackest Night, is that everybody turned into a Black Lantern because everybody's been dead. And then and gorilla covers, of course, is the number one thing that he wants more of. Which,
I mean, sure,
it's hard to not agree.
I get that.
Particularly flying gorilla covers.
Yeah, flying gorilla. Okay,
it's very specific.
I mean, I can be on board with this concept. That's fine. Well, having brought Hal Jordan back from the dead,
right? Let's talk about that for a second.
So, as an artist, I draw what you tell me to draw.
Sure.
And I try to make it work. I try to make it as visually interesting as possible. And not to talk about Marc again, but the best script I've ever gotten was from Marc. Specifically because he says in his scripts, this is what I want the audience to feel. Not just, draw this. It's like, draw this in a way that makes the audience feel this, which is great. As an artist, that's what I want. But you're on a project like Day of Judgment, and our only real rule that we were given from DC at the beginning of it was, you have to bring back Hal Jordan as the Spectre.
Now, was that the editorial demand?
Yeah,
that wasn't Jeff's idea. Like, this is what I want to do.
No, it was handed down to us. There was a different editor on it initially, and they left. And then there was a new editor, but that was the mandate. So, that was their one thing that they demanded, and the one thing that Jeff and I demanded was that Blue Devil would be in it, or we were walking, because
why
you're
not?
doing something with all the Magic characters. Damn it, there's going to be a Blue Devil in it.
Right.
And he put the Legion of Superheroes in there for one panel just because I love Legion. from a kid. So, having said all that, it was a great project. It's probably the most high profile thing. I also always recommend to younger artists, be careful when you take on a big company-wide crossover like that, because it's brutal. It's really, really brutal. And I was too young, and I was not ready for a project like that. But I got to work with Jeff right at the start of his career. I know how many Green Lantern action figures he had back then, and it was a lot of Green Lantern action
I'm sure
figures.
It's at least doubled by now.
Yeah, there's no way it's just doubled. There's way more than that now.
Yeah, you're a Green Lantern. You are a Green Lantern, Bob.
But as an artist, I don't have an opinion about that. I do. My job is to bring the writer's vision to life as best I can. As a writer, I would have thought something like that, because I'm a big believer in, once a character's dead, they have to stay dead, or else it's kind of you lose the punch. I did a book. One of the very first creator-owned things I did during the pandemic was a book called Johnny Chaos, and spoiler alert, he dies at the end, and the whole point of the story is him being willing to die. It's about a fallen hero who is called into battle one last time, which is a trope that, I've always avoided. But I'm like, I'm just going to embrace it, see where it goes. He's not a nice guy. He sacrifices himself at the end and does something good. And the first comments I got from people after the finale finally posted on Twitter was, "Are you going to do another one?"
Right.
No.
Right. He's dead.
He's dead. And the point of the story is that he dies, and that if he doesn't sacrifice himself at the end, I feel like the story loses a lot of its emotional punch, and that's what it's all about for me. It's about the emotional punch. So yeah, I mean, in my own stories, if a character's dead, they're going to stay dead. But when you're doing comics for DC or Marvel and they want you to bring a comic back, this is the nature of our job. We bring them back and we try to make it as interesting and as good as we possibly can. But I would push, as a writer, I would push back on that. Like, I would, there has to be a good reason.
So, since we invoked them, all these people at the same time, there's a great story in that Keith Giffen tells that he will only come back and do Legion of Superheroes if they let him kill Karate Kid.
Again.
He hates Karate Kid to no, there's no limit of the hate he has for Karate Kid.
He killed him pretty brutally.
Oh, but it was so good. It was good. It meant so much. Like that the death of Karate Kid. I have him. I have him. He signed that and Ball. It's the only Legion I have both him and Ball signed.
Wow.
And it was brutal. And then so he's. It's funny how
it was really violent for that time. Even though I think it was one of their first direct market books.
It was on the Baxter. It was in the first arc of the Baxter paper. Yeah. So it was off. It was not coded. It was direct market. And they did. DC went to New Teen Titans and Legion to Baxter at the same time, and issue 1 of New Teen Titans, Dick and Corey are in bed and she's obviously topless, right? Yeah. So they just went right for it, and then the brutality in that first arc, what Mech did to Isla, was horrific. Even though a lot of it was like kind of off panel, you felt it, right?
Oh yeah, you did. It was very good storytelling from Keith.
Right,
really good storytelling.
And and then the 5 years later is some of my favorite stuff of all time.
Oh yeah, without question. I mean, we all have different periods of Keith's career where you like his art better than others. I don't. I love it all. I don't care. I mean, I think maybe some of his very, very early work where he was still kind of working through his Kirby influence. Mm-hmm. Like some of that stuff I didn't react to as well as a kid. But once you hit his golden age in Legion, he was learning what he was doing.
He was learning his stuff. It's just that simple. Keith is also one of the most interesting human beings I've ever met. He's just fascinating, and I'm proud to have known him for millennia now. He's really a gifted guy.
One of the books that has influenced me the most on aside from things like Moonshadow and everything Ray Bradbury ever wrote was Ambush Bug.
Sure.
It's just that attitude of none of this is serious.
It doesn't matter. These are funny books.
Sense. None of this actually makes any sense when you start taking it apart. That was eye-opening to me as a kid. That was just like, it's okay. It's okay that this is absurd. It's okay that none of this makes any sense. Yes, we can all obsess over the continuity. Yes, we can all obsess over, what the real names of all the Legionnaires are, because I remember.
Sure.
But, then to have a book from him that was just like, yeah, this is just fun. Let's just have some fun. And the fact that you've got the same guy who can do the 5-year later story with the beer bombs was doing Ambush Bug. I mean, he's just an incredibly talented guy. And
oh yeah.
He's been a real inspiration for me as an artist, not only just as a kid, but he has never stopped evolving. He's never stayed still. He's always tried something new. And I've always tried to do that in my career. It's like, you draw one way for a couple of years and you're like, I want to try something new now. And I go through that myself.
If Alex Raymond can do it, you can do it. It's just
but I'll never be Alex Raymond.
Aspire to the best. Aspire to be the best.
We have got to get to this Flash Gordon story.
I sat next to Keith for a while at this party that preceded the premiere of the first Suicide Squad movie. The premiere was in New York, and DC threw this lavish, wonderful party. There are photographs of it that I'll sell you. But oh no, you got it. Oh no! Oh my God! Oh,
you mean this party?
Yeah,
that's the party. Yeah, that's me there on the far right.
There's you. Okay.
Yeah, that's Johnny Ostrander.
I think I saw.
That's
Jeff.
That's Pete.
There's Brian.
That's Pete Townsend's grandfather. Between Jim Lee and John Ostrander, it's Pete Townsend's grandfather.
Wow. Pete Townsend's grandfather.
Yeah, but. Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Oh, Frank, I hope you're watching this.
Well, I had this keyed up because this is the last time that you were together with Steve Orlando, who's right here.
Oh yeah. Jeez, so, I remember.
I didn't even see him back there.
Party.
Yep, he's in there, and I think it's Lee Weeks. And
so I was complimenting.
Great.
I was.
And look, I'm in here too. Back here. See, there's me.
No. I was complimenting Keith on something he had done with that guy in the back, Dan DiDio, that I really enjoyed. And he says, yeah, that was good, but have you read my Hanna-Barbera stuff? And I said, well, no, actually, I haven't. And he goes, oh, you got to read it. It's really good. And he was so enthused and excited for,
I guess, what about the rabbit one?
I'm sorry?
Oh, no, I'm not sure. He did something DC Hanna-Barbera-ish?
Yeah.
I forget which one he did. Yeah, one of them.
I think it was one of the Flintstone things. And I did read it, and I enjoyed the hell out of it, but I thought it was so funny that usually when you compliment somebody's work, they'll go, oh, well, thank you. And then they'll work the other stuff in later. Keith would have none of that. It was like, nope, check out my Hanna-Barbera stuff. That's great.
Well, when I met him and I was talking to him about, how I felt about Legion and everything like that, he's like, I'm doing a new take on Inferior 5. It's coming out. You gotta check this out because I can't wait for everybody to see it. So
I'm trying to remember. I've only met him a couple times, and I think I basically cornered him and just like, if you ever do Ambush Bug again, call me. You gotta let me do Ambush Bug stuff.
So I want to talk about your art a little bit, and this ties into one of Mike's things, and that's so like there's this thing called backgrounds.
Yes.
Things that make sense, and I'll also say that I could have chosen Dead Kings 1, but I didn't. I chose specifically this cover because there are backgrounds. There's stuff here.
Oh yeah,
it's not just two people on.
Well, I believe that is, believe that's my friend Michael Gatos, actually, not me.
Is this Mike Gatos? I'm sorry, I thought it was
I
you.
believe that's Michael. No, it's fine. Mike Gatos is one of my oldest friends in comics. I will always publicize Mike, co-creator of Jessica Jones.
Right, your cover is the white.
Yeah, it's just snow.
It's just snow. There's no background on that one, so you lose there. But in general,
true story. I drew that cover on summer vacation in the middle of a heat wave. So it was very aspirational for me. I just really wanted it not to be so damn hot.
If Steve's writing, there's going to be Russia involved. So there's that.
Well, so the funny thing is, one of the things I got tagged with a lot early in my career is that I didn't draw a lot of background. And Marc Chiarello at DC Comics pulled me aside and said, "Listen, Matt, you don't have to do anything complicated. Just put a lamp back there. It's fine. You just have to do something to indicate a sense of space."
Right.
And then I went insane and just filled everything with backgrounds. But that was a learning process for me because I've always approached my art as a writer, not as an artist. And I'm about telling the story. My feeling is always like, if you stop on a page to look at the pretty art too long, I'm not doing my job because you're being pulled out of the story. Now, I want you to go back after reading it and be like, oh, this guy doesn't suck. He's pretty good. But for me, it's not about being flashy. It's about conveying, again, back to Marc's script notes, it's about conveying what you want the audience to be feeling. And I get, backgrounds for me was like a learning process of how do you make backgrounds work so that you're not pulling the audience out? I don't want them looking at all the little details. I want them to have a sense of place and move on. And that's been an interesting experience. I'm starting to feel okay with it.
Backgrounds help establish space that you could use later. They're almost flash forwards. You put that lamp in the background and that's it. But the reader mentally understands that there's space between the character and that lamp. And then later on, a couple panels, maybe even a couple pages later, you have, I don't know, a fight scene or something going on in the space that you've established. And it works better because the reader is already accustomed to thinking that there's space there. It's just storytelling technique. And my point in my column was that we've let the beautiful coloring, fill in those spaces for us. And whereas it's very pretty and it's very nice that we actually have literally 3 million more colors in comics than the naked eye can distinguish. But we still need to do backgrounds. You still need to do it.
One of the other things. Sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, of course, you had to give a dig into Vinnie Coletta in the column as well, though. So.
Oh yeah, it's in my contract.
Of course.
One of the rules that I don't know if someone taught me this, someone like Chiarello or someone like Steve Mitchell, who I worked a lot with in the 90s. I sort of picked up the concept of when the page leaves my desk, it should be printable and it should look cool. So even if there aren't colors, it should be absolutely readable. You should have a sense of everything that needs to tell the story has to be there on the page. And I feel like if you're leaving something for a colorist to fill in or fix, again, you're not doing your job.
Well, how do you
colors
feel?
Can enhance, but shouldn't be doing the work.
You ink your own stuff, right? So, have you ever gone through the process of penciling and handing it off to an inker? How did you?
I did in the 90s. I worked with Marc Morales at Marvel. I worked with Steve.
Marc is brilliant.
Marc's absolutely incredible.
I have a page hanging on our wall that Marc inked right now. So
he easily one of the best inkers to be working in modern comics. I worked with Mark Pennington at CrossGen in my one whole year. Destroyed another company. I was very proud of myself. And several other people like Steve Mitchell and Wade Von Graubadger at DC as well. But anyways, So that was the 90s, and I think I kind of hit a point with that where I didn't like being inked by other people, not because I did a bad job or anything like that.
No.
But my sensibility, everybody sort of looks at my stuff and goes, "Oh, that'll be easy to ink. Oh, that'll be easy to color." And the simple art style, or those very, very graphic art styles, you have to be incredibly precise, and it's a real art form to keep something precise without it being stiff. So, anyways, at a certain point, I started inking myself. I really had to fight for inking myself. Which is, again, nothing against the people I worked with. They're some absolutely amazing people. But now I'm coloring myself too. Not because I'm such a great colorist, but because
you're pretty good.
I'm putting this stuff out myself, and I can't afford a color.
Did you take a class?
No,
you've just figured it out on your own.
God, I'm going to feel terrible because I'm not remembering his name off the top of my head. Michael Russell.
K. Michael Russell. He does
K. Michael Russell.
He does
the
YouTube.
YouTube stuff.
Yep.
I literally watched several of his videos.
They're brilliant.
And went, okay, I'll just make this up as I went. But I've been working with Jordy Belair.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, oh, you just throw down a color, it'll be great. Yeah,
she's next level.
She makes it look easy.
No, and you could do this back in the flat color days, in the 27 color palette days, when Gil Kane started to ink his own stuff. He inked himself open for color.
Yeah.
I don't think he ever understood that that's what he was doing. That's just how he sort of floated. And it was beautiful. You could color it up just something beautiful. I mean, you look at his covers before that and you could see that. But he didn't have that opportunity until he had full control of his art.
Yeah.
And was that a cat?
There's just a random cattail.
It's okay.
Okay.
He wants to talk about comics.
Or were you just happy to see us? I mean,
listen, there are high-level Hollywood producers who have seen my cat's butt on Zoom calls. So
they like to aim for the camera.
Yeah, they really do.
My cats have done appearances here, so.
But for me, coloring my own stuff has been really interesting, and it's actually been slowly sort of changing the way I draw. Like I said, it is a practical concern. I make no money on these projects. I'm doing them purely for the love of the medium, and to prove to people what I'm capable of. And sort of like really starting to dive down into the storytelling possibilities of color has been really interesting. And as someone of my generation, I'm 52, 30 years of doing this. My generation, you either did pencils, inks, or colors or letters. You didn't do more than one.
All of it.
And now you're seeing these young kids, and I'm starting to call
all of
them
it.
kids. Yeah, you see these young kids, and it's such a part of their artistic DNA already. They grew up coloring themselves. They grew up inking themselves. And they have just this amazing toolbox that they have for telling stories now that my generation doesn't have because we didn't mess around with that stuff because you stayed in your lane. And
have you read Jules Pfeiffer's Great Comic Book Heroes?
Yes, a long time ago.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was the first comic book about comic
was it really the first one?
Yeah. I mean, there were some essays, but in terms of one writer, and it was great. It was a mind changer for me, a life changer completely. But he had a comment in that book that I've always held on to. He mourned the loss of the complete artist.
Yeah.
Who at least would pencil and ink, if not colors, sometimes letter. Jim Aparo, for example. He mourned that, and he said offhandedly, few people were inking their own work. Few people cared. And I thought that was an odd comment. I mean, I like Jules. I worship Jules. There's
Yeah.
no question about it.
He's
But
amazing.
this is a guy who got it. This is a guy who got his start in the Eisner studio, doing everything, doing
Yeah.
everything. But the more I think about it, and this book was written in like 66, 65, 66. The more I think about it, the more I think, oh, my God, that's true. That's absolutely right. And the process that you're going through, that you continue to go through from your entire career over the past 30 years, is that growth process. You know, you're rediscovering the beauty of being in total control. That doesn't make you a control freak. It makes you an artist.
You know, the thing that probably had the biggest effect on the visual look of my work wasn't starting to ink myself. It was starting to letter myself. Because there's a whole art form to lettering that
Yes.
you just are not taught as an artist. My generation, we only had the Joe Kubert school. You couldn't go anywhere to take comic book classes. You just figured it out reading comics.
Did you go to Kubert?
Reading. I didn't go to Kubert. I didn't graduate from college, but that's a whole
It's okay,
stain on
neither
my
did I.
life.
Don't worry about it.
I was working for Disney within a year, so it's a complicated situation.
College is supposed to be a means to an end.
Yes,
You got there a better way.
I got there a different way, but just learning the intricacies of lettering has like I don't understand artists who give up control of lettering now, because it's like I put it right where I want to lead your eye through that panel and then through that page. And that's the one thing I might be a control freak about.
So I was flipping through this earlier today just to remind myself and stuff like that, and I'm like, who lettered this? This is really good. And then I go back and I realize that you lettered it yourself, and it's really good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And I'm a nerd about lettering.
I love lettering. Kevin Nolan to me is one of the perfect artists. He did the Hellboy logo, one of the great logos of our time. And it really is a fantastic logo. Yeah, that was Kevin. Just kind of did it for his friend. But as much as I love his black and white work and his color work too, but specifically his black and white when he's really leaning into the shadows. My favorite thing about Kevin is his lettering. His lettering is just gorgeous. And that's one of those things I never thought I would notice about another artist. It was like, that lettering is really freaking good. So, anyways.
Did I ever tell you the Kevin Nolan, well, it's the Lost Mignola Batman story. Do you know that story?
No, I don't know the story.
I'll share this because it's a good story to share with viewers. So this story came to me a couple of ways. Originally, I heard it from Kevin, and I also heard it from John Workman. And the way that it came out was that there was a Batman Villain Secret Files several years ago, and in it was after DC stopped sending comps and stuff like that. So a box shows up at the Workman's house, and there's these Batman Secret Files in there, and John's like, I don't even know why I'm getting this. I didn't do this. And in it, he's flipping through, and there's this Clayface story, and he's like, "Oh, this is Mignola. I can see this," and he gets very excited about it because he's a big fan, and he's like, "Oh, this lettering's it's pretty good," and he's like, I could look at this for a little bit, and then he realized he went to the credits and it was him. He had lettered it, and he didn't remember it because this story. And now I'm not 100% sure on this. So Bob Schreck edited that book. He put that story in it. But originally it was a story that was Mignola had done the art in, had done the pencils. Kevin was supposed to do the inks. John lettered it. but they never did the inks. And I believe Denny was the editor at the time and hated the story, hated the inks, didn't like it at all, canceled the story, didn't happen.
Yeah.
But they had the pencils. Apparently, at some point, people had seen them. There had been stats of them, and they sent the original pencils out to some inker in Canada to practice on.
Oh.
And when they come along to decide to do this, this secret villain, somebody's like, "Oh, remember that Mignola Clayface story? Let's go pull that up and let's put that in here." And they couldn't find it, and then they realized what had happened. So they find out the guy never touched them. Whoever that inker was. So they got the pencils back, and at this point, Mike calls up Kevin and says, "Hey, I know you were originally supposed to ink these pages, and they're going to print them, but I think I kind of want to ink them myself." And of course, Kevin's like, "Whatever you want to do, it's fine, no problem." And when Mike got the pages back and looked at him, he's like, "I don't even know who this guy is anymore. You go ahead and you ink him." So, I don't even know who this Mike Mignola guy was who drew these. It's not me anymore. So go ahead and you do it. So that's how that story ends up. But that is
my favorite thing about Mike. I mean, obviously Mike's a very big influence on me in a number of ways. One, I think he's a very underrated writer. I think his short stories, whenever I teach comics, I always point to his short Hellboy stories as being, if you're going to condense a story and still have an emotional impact, this is how you do it. This is one way to do it. But anyways, I never quite realized how influenced by Frazetta he was.
Oh, I can see that, especially early on.
Sure. Yeah, and I had seen some of that stuff.
The Hulk stuff.
And I remember, and I hope you'll forgive me saying this, I remember seeing that one issue, or his first issue on Alpha Flight. It was like, who is this artist? They're terrible.
Well,
I hate this.
Because did you get the flip? Did you get the switch?
I did. Did
you get both of them?
Switch. Yeah, I got both of them.
I just picked up the comics interview or Amazing Heroes where they're interviewing them about that. From last week, but yeah,
I was a kid and I love John Byrne.
Sure.
Which when you look at my art, is kind of funny now because it's like, did you really need all those lines, John? I mean,
Well, it's funny when you say that because your style is more similar to Mike's than than it is to John's.
But I started out as a Giffen guy. I started out as a big fan of John Byrne. Which still my favorite moment of my entire life as a comic book creator is sitting at Terry Austin's house on his couch watching Buckaroo Banzai with Terry, and he's just like, "This is the greatest moment of my life. It will never get better unless George Lucas walks through the door right now. It ain't getting any better than that." So, anyways, but that's where it came from. So I saw somebody like Mike Mignola, and I didn't. It's like the first time you see Jack Kirby as a kid. At least in my generation. My generation didn't like him. It was only until you learned a little bit about art and you went, holy shit, this guy knows what he's doing. Look at all this amazing stuff.
I just recently went to a show and I went in the dollar bins and I picked up 2 copies of Our Fighting Forces featuring the Losers. One was penciled by John Severin. And then a little bit later, there was one written and drawn by Kirby. And the Kirby one, it was terrible. It wasn't I think Royer just fucked him over. Excuse me language, but Royer's inks were terrible on it.
It just work on that one.
It just looked so blotchy and blobbish. It was bad, but the Chevron ones were really nice.
Was that the work, or was that the way it was printed?
I think, to be honest with you, I think that there was either Royer hurt him or he didn't help him. Because if Jack had left it the way that it was inked, it should have been fixed. And if it wasn't, if Royer just hurt him, then that's the case.
Every artist I know has tried to ink Kirby at some point, and it's next to impossible. So I don't know how anyone ever did it. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
It's okay. I wasn't going to talk about Joe Sinnott, but
Go ahead.
That loser story was towards the end of Jack's tenure at DC, and he was not happy. And DC was never happy with him. For reasons we can get into later. They're very complicated, and I only know parts of the story. But that overall did not work out. I don't think he ever really forgave him for canceling New Gods for no good reason. And I looked up the sales figures, so I know that. And it's a shame. Because if there was anything in the world that they really needed at the point in time when they got Jack to come over, it was Jack Kirby. And they screwed it up on day one by having Superman's face be redrawn. And that was just an insult to a great man, and beside the point from why you hired Jack in the first place. So he wasn't really thrilled by that point. So I suspect that he saw Royer's inks. They both lived close together, comparatively speaking, and just didn't care because it was DC and he was out of there.
Yeah.
And his work, he created some good stuff, but his work after that was never the same. I remember the first Jack Kirby story I saw, and
that was Fantastic Four #1.
No, it was like 3-4 years before that. It was The Shield with Joe
sure.
Simon, and that just destroyed me. It just destroyed me, the power and all that. And then shortly thereafter, I saw his work on Green Arrow. Now, not to put George Papp down, who's one of the great creators of comics, but it was everything that George's work was not. Bold, exciting, dynamic. And he only did it for a year, and it was published in 2 different books, and there were like 6-page stories, and it didn't matter. That was the reason why I would buy any book that story was in. So Jack had an enormous effect on my developing a sense of wonder, a visual sense of wonder. Jack had an enormous impact on that, and it would be nice to see a little bit more of that. I mean, time moves on, and people, like we could talk about how great, Chester Gould was or whatever, but, time marches on. But Jack is, and probably, well, I can't say will always be, but certainly still is the king of comics in my book.
Yeah, I mean, he's just foundational. You don't get any of the comics that we have today without Jack Kirby. It's like the Beatles.
Right.
The Beatles, we there's always a kind of chicken or the egg thing for me when I think about the Beatles. It's like we recognize them as just these phenomenal songwriters, but it's kind of because that's where we learned the idea of what a song should sound like. We learned that from them. So it kind of gets a little mixed, but like Kirby is the one who showed us what comics could be at a very important stage where comics was changing.
Well, let me make that transition for music. John Lennon talked about the Jack Kirby of rock and roll by saying they shouldn't call this rock and roll. They should just call it Chuck Berry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Nope. That's pretty right.
That's it. Yeah. Yep.
That's basic human truths right there.
So I'm going to segue, and I'm going to talk. Let's talk about truths, and let's talk about wisdom. And and so people should go to Matt's Instagram, and you've been doing this thing for some time where you're putting up career advice for people, this type of things, which I love this, being everyone's comic dad, and this type of things. Like where does this come from? Why did you feel the need to do this? And this is perfect. This one is a great one.
Yeah.
success in comics is 50% skill, 50% networking, 50% perseverance. I mean, it's hard work, and comics is hard work. And giving people, kind of the idea of how to be a professional comic book, a comic book professional. And
it kind of, to be honest, it kind of comes out of the pandemic. And when the pandemic happened and we all put our pencils down, I got one of the last books that probably was turned into DC, an issue of House of Whispers before it all just kind of shut down. That's when I just went off and started doing my own comics. And I had just kind of gotten to a point in my career and in the work that I was doing where I don't care anymore. I'm just going to be who I am. And I'm never going to be cool. I'm never going to be one of the top, back in the day when we had Wizard Magazine, I'm never going to be on that list in the back. So, I'm okay with that. And out of that kind of came, well, what can I tell people about what this is really like? Not the sort of bullshit, pardon my French, dreams of, oh, you're going to get rich and famous and your comic is going to get turned into a movie and you're going to be just swimming in success. And that's not the experience 99.9% of us have.
Sure.
And, I smoke a pipe and sometimes I wear cardigans. So I'm just going to be comic book dad.
There you go.
But when I first started kind of giving people advice, I would always say, listen, I'm not your dad, but, and I'm like, screw it. I'm your comic book dad. You should listen to me. And it's just like, there's all that stuff that no one tells you when you get in this industry. And I was lucky in that when I moved to LA to work at Disney for a short period, I fell into a group of people, people like Steve Siegel and James Robinson and Steve Mitchell and Marv Wolfman and Len Wein. I was like somewhat regularly playing poker with Len Wein and Steve Mitchell and Marv Wolfman, and sometimes Mike Barr was there. And I'm just like sitting at this table. I don't know how to play poker. I'm a terrible poker player. But I'm sitting next to Len Wein. So who cares? But, these were the guys who would you screw up a lot in comics. And Len or Marv or Steve, they'd be the ones being like, oh, yeah, I did that. Don't do that. And I had access to institutional knowledge that your average comic book creator just isn't going to get. And I spent a lot of quarters getting that information, and Marv Wolfman ended up with most of them because he's a much better poker player than I will ever be. So, I just kind of, like I said, I just sort of said screw it. And I try to be as honest as I can. I try to be as positive as I can, because you can really fall down a well of cynicism doing this. You got a lot of things to be very cynical and upset about. And I get cynical and upset about them. But, that's not what I'm trying to convey to people.
Sure.
Yeah, I could sit here, and Kirby's right. Comics will break your heart. We have all gotten our hearts. I don't even think it's an if you let it. It's going to break your heart, whether you like it or not. If
you love the medium, if you love the work, you're doing it out of that love. Sure, you want to pay the rent and maybe you want to make some real money. If so, at some point you're going to realize comics wasn't probably the best decision you could have made, or at least the most reliable decision you could have made. I had that same thing in the West Coast right before you. On the East Coast, rather. The poker game then was usually at Len's house in Queens. Len and Marv. Jim Shooter was usually there. Tom DeFalco, Paul Levitz. It was a hell of a crowd, and I didn't know poker from shit. But
so you or me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. But man, it was the most fascinating time I've had.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, to this very day, and this goes back to 1976, I've been wondering why Steve Mitchell doesn't get royalty checks every time they use Billy Batson.
Yeah.
So there.
Steve's great. I genuinely would not have survived Los Angeles without Steve. I genuinely would probably not still be able to work without Steve. The number of times he saved me, the number of times he's kind of sat me down and said, "You're screwing up. Don't screw up." And the number of times where he just kind of, call somebody up and get me a job because I was really struggling. And we all have mentors in this business, and I think again, this leading back to the comic book dad is I can't be everybody's mentor. I can barely keep myself working, but I can post the advice that I got from guys like Steve and Marv and Len.
Yes, and your most powerful influence is your work, not your word.
Yeah,
that's by far the most powerful influence. If you get a chance, next time you see Steve, ask him about the hamburger I mailed him in Los Angeles from the Archdiocese of Buffalo.
Okay, I mean, come on.
Oh yeah. Yep.
This is why I bring people on this show, just to experience Mike in this way.
I mean, okay, I'll ask Steve about it next time I talk to him.
All right, so we are kind of going to wind down. I caught a couple of things we're going to talk about, but when you talk to Marc again, and if you mention this, the first time Marc met me, or in that way, was that he from a panel. You lost us again. We can hear you.
Yeah.
We can hear
you.
Just
we can hear you fine.
So
all right, just keep on talking.
We'll keep talking. So from a panel in Baltimore, he stopped the panel because I'd asked a question, and he said, "Did anybody tell you look like Dan DiDio?" And so he will know me as that guy because
you are that.
Yeah, that to Marc, I'm that guy.
You're the Dan DiDio cosplayer.
Yeah, sure. I want to talk, and since Mike's back, it's the time of the show. We try and do this year. It's important. We're going to try and celebrate the 40th anniversary of First Comics, because this is the 40th anniversary of First Comics. So it's and with our guests, we're going to do this. So this is the First Comics portion of the show. And Matt, what is your favorite First Comics series?
Boy, I'm gonna kind of hate you for that question.
Yeah, well, it's hard.
I'll tell you right now. I briefly shared a studio with Howard in L.A.
Okay.
American Flag.
Well, then I already know what your answer is, because if you'll be excommunicated if you don't.
I will be excommunicated, but it was John Sabre.
Of course.
I mean, there's no. It was for me like in high school what Moonshadow was for me in college, and set me off firmly on this course. I read John Sable and went, "Oh, comics can do that." Mm-hmm. I didn't know you could do that in comics. I mean, American Flag was brilliant. It didn't get a lot of the references. It was very sexy, and I liked that. That was great, but I didn't understand. I didn't understand the sophistication of that until later. John Sable, I read and went, I care about this character. I care about what he's doing. I care about the journey that he's on.
It's beautiful.
And as a high school kid, who had grown up on Legion, superheroes and stuff like that, it's like, oh, it was an action movie I cared about.
Yeah.
In a comic book form. Now, having said that, Joe Staten is one of my favorite people on the face of the planet, and if I don't mention E-Man, I'm going to feel guilty, because I drew Mike Mauser all the time when I was a kid. I loved that character. So, First Comics really, no BS, Mike. I mean, I'm slightly starstruck. I obviously can handle myself well because I lived in Hollywood for 7 years. and would run into famous people in the Starbucks across the street. We were like, "Oh, you were in the Police Academy movies, cool." But like, first comics was a big deal, and not to. One of my best friends in the world is a young adult author named Dan Waters. He's a fantastic writer.
He's
really,
brilliant.
really good.
Yeah.
His favorite comic is Grimjack.
Really?
Oh, it's one of my favorites in terms of all those that I worked with. But if you'd asked me that same question, Bob, and I'm pointing to you like as if you're over there.
Well, I'm not going to ask you that question until we get a lot further down the road. Okay.
I would say Munden's Bar is my favorite project to work on. Not only because that's diplomatic, but because everybody did wonderful, bizarre stuff on Munden's Bar. We did the same thing in Wasteland, although it had a much sharper edge.
Oh God, I forgot you edited Wasteland.
Oh yeah,
I
Wasteland
read that
was
when I was a kid. That was amazing.
Wasteland
Close.
Yeah, well, I'm in the documentary.
Have you seen the documentary?
I haven't seen the documentary.
It's on Hulu. It's called For Mad Men Only. Go watch it.
Okay.
He's in it. There's people who act as Mike Gold in it.
Oh really?
True. Yeah.
Who'd they get to play you, Mike?
Yep. No.
I'm not gonna ruin it for you.
It's good.
Or for anybody watching this. It's on Hulu right now. It'll be elsewhere, I'm sure. It came out about 2 years ago. I am so proud to have been in that documentary. I mean, first of all, Del Close is a legend. Yeah. Second of all, Del Close was an incredible madman.
Yeah.
And just walking around him was an experience. You learned from that. I took some classes from him when I first got on radio because my radio partner was writing for Second City, and Del has been part of my life for a long time.
That's freaking insane. And for the audience who doesn't know who we're talking about, basically you don't have modern comedy without Del Close.
Correct.
That's true.
You just don't.
He told me a story about how in the 50s he and Lenny Bruce and brother Theodore, a guy who is just probably the most mind-bending guy who ever existed, more so than Del even, and Irwin Corey and Lord Buckley were all hanging around the apartment naked together one day.
Like you do.
That's just, right. They were just talking, and these are 5 of the most inventive minds in the history of Earth.
Yeah.
Not just comedy, but Earth. And
one of these days, you and I might, we'll have a very long conversation about the Goon Show and Firesign Theater.
Oh, I'd love to. Oh, I'm a big Firesign fan. I played it when I was on the air. I love those guys, and one's still around.
Yeah.
David Osmond's still around.
I'm a big radio comedy nerd.
We'll have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we can.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right, so Bob, what's your favorite first comic on this 40th anniversary?
Well,
or we can ask the cat.
So it's difficult for me. I will tell you the first comics that I read were Badger.
Oh yeah, God, I forgot about that.
It's a good book, and it was that another autobiographical book.
But I will say it's Sable for me.
Yeah.
I there's not much, and I love Grimjack. I think Grimjack is some of the smartest political commentary to come out of the 80s by far. But there it is, you see, you hit it really on the head. That Sable is the action movie you wanted to see. He is James Bond and Mission Impossible and all of those things and The Saint all tied up in one. And he is and he was doing things that I cared about. Exactly that point. Like there was a thing I talked to Grell about the third. It was 30 issue 30 or something. One the Coddish issue.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
Oh man.
Like,
Man, that's
come
Yeah.
on.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, where did that come from? And he's like, well, it was important to me to identify where he had come from, and that would it be important to him to do that story. And just it was perfect.
Yeah. Well, but that was a great thing about the '80s, and I think that was the thing that first, and to a certain degree, Epic Comics
Mm-hmm.
gave to my generation was that suddenly it was okay to have a voice.
Yes.
We didn't really have very voicey stuff. You had Kirby, and there were a couple of other guys who had a distinct kind of style.
Toth.
But Toth, yeah,
Sure.
perfect example. But it was stuff like American Flag and Sable and stuff like Moonshadow that said you can do a comic book that is your voice, and people would read it.
And it's interesting because I've kind of had this conversation with people over the past few months and stuff, just because of what First means to me and what we're doing with it, and the stuff that's coming in Baltimore later on in the year. But people will throw like, well, what about Eclipse? And no disrespect to Eclipse, they made some really fun.
They did some great stuff.
Yeah.
Some great stuff, and and then they hired and hired Tim away from you. So, with Scout, so he left.
See, he didn't leave. I mean, he was tired of doing Grimjack,
Right.
and I get that. He wanted to do his own project. I really get that. And he wanted to do it somewhere else because it would be different. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely, just as I had mentioned to you, Matt, about all the different publishers, I think that's a good experience. I think that's a growth experience. Timothy and I have worked together quite a bit since then on a variety of projects,
Sure.
including Grimjack.
But I think Scout is a first book just published by Eclipse, to be honest with you.
That's interesting, and I see that. I understand that. Matt, I got to tell you, Mike Grell and I we used to plot Sable, the little 2-part stories, like 6 months at a time. And therefore, there are a couple of stories that we weren't able to get around to for one reason or another. And the plots still exist in my brain, if not Mike's.
Right.
Just saying.
Oh, yeah, let's talk.
And I'm doing a video thing with Mike next Monday, actually.
Yeah,
so.
you should tell him that weird tall guy who came up to him and just got nerd all over him at Asheville Comic Book Con. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to see him in a couple of weeks at Heroes, so I'll grab him then too.
I mean, I'm not going to anything. Well, no, wait, I'm going to Awesome Con in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, but you got to come down to Baltimore. We'll see you at Baltimore.
Yeah,
we will see you.
I have a funny relationship with conventions. I don't do a lot of conventions because I feel like creators like me tend to get lost in the mix of these things.
Yes.
Especially as they get longer. I'm not a big enough name. But like the local shows like Awesome Con and Baltimore Con, I swear these people forget that I live in the area.
Right. Well, like I said, even if you're not in the show, we'll see you here.
Absolutely. Ministry of Brewing. Not to give a plug to them, but if you drink, we should talk.
Well, we do a Thursday for people around. We do a Thursday night before the Baltimore. We go over to Guinness. So if you want to come, you have a standing invitation.
I just remind me because I'm an idiot and doing 3 projects at the same time.
I will.
And I
we'll
will
get you there.
Of course. So. Baltimore is a wonderful convention for one reason, for the main reason. I mean, because there's really good people running it, but it's about comics. That's why it's a great show.
Yeah.
Conventions used to be about comics. This one still is.
I kind of go back and forth on that. Like, I don't. It really bothered me at first when the focus shifted to film and TV and cosplayers, and it took getting to know a few cosplayers to kind of maybe not be quite so angry about that. And I'm much more okay with it now. I'm much more okay with them being like multimedia things. And comics, let's be honest, in the culture, I've had people, when I tell them what I do for a living, they're like, oh, they still make comics? It's just the average people on the street. People don't know. And so, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world to have other things going on to bring them in. But then you do a show like Baltimore, or I just did a show, like the only show I did last year was in Charlottesville. It was like the first year of the show. And it was all about comics. And it's really nice. I mean, sure, there were cosplayers. There were cosplayers there, and there were a couple actors from Game of Thrones or whatever. But it was like,
it's fine.
And that's fine. But it was like it really was nice. Like, people showed up and they were there because they were interested in comics. And that was really, really kind of cool. So I don't begrudge, the shows wanting to bring in people and make money. Not my business. No, I'm a terrible businessman. If I was a good businessman, I would not be making comics.
The big shows that are really media shows, to me, they're not comic book conventions. They serve a different function. They may have evolved to that point, but they serve a different function. That function is fine. Yeah. But I don't get around as well as I used to. My whole life has been one long, unending comic book convention. I was at Phil Seuling's first in 1968.
Oh, good Lord, yeah.
Yeah, I was like 3 months old or something, but it was, and it never stopped. You're in this business, you do a lot of conventions. I still do, well, I guess I'm down to about 3 a year now, whatever Bob actually talks me into. And
good work, Bob.
And I love it, and now I've gotten to the point in my career, such as it may be right now, that I can actually handle people saying, well, my grandfather really loved First Comics.
Listen.
Yeah, you can't. You gotta just roll with it. I still struggle with just people saying nice things about my work. I'm like,
I had a very hard time. My daughter thinks it's hilarious that I like we get phone calls from celebrities who want to talk about comics for some good reason, and I'm impressed. And she says, no, they called you. I'm impressed.
That's pretty cool.
I am humble, but nobody knows it.
Well, if you're just less humble and told everybody how humble you were, then they'd know, Mike, and then this wouldn't be a problem for you.
That's exactly right.
That's all I'm saying. Bob's making me, we have to end this now face.
No, I'm not.
Oh yeah,
I am, but people are running from the hills, and
it's almost June, Bob.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
We're gonna end it up, but again, everybody who is come back and watch this, if you're not watching now, make sure you go check out Matt's stuff. His Patreon is in the comments, so you can link to it there.
Oh, thank you.
And definitely do that, because some of his amazing stuff, it's only available there for now. I would like you to print it.
Working on it, and
we'll get to that. But thanks so much for doing this, Matt. We'll do it again. It was great having you on.
Great seeing you again, Bob. Mike, fantastic meeting you. I'm a huge fan.
It was wonderful meeting you. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you very much. That's very kind. We'll do this again.
And in 2 weeks, we'll be back with the next member of the Demultiverse in Tom Mandrake. So stay tuned for that. The announcement should be coming out in the next couple of days. And come see us then.
All right. Thank you.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?